You didn't land here by accident. This moment was written for you. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, like something deeper has always been calling you while everyone else stayed asleep, this is your confirmation. You're not crazy. You're not too emotional. You're not overthinking. You're awakening. You're not just here to exist. You're here to shift. You were born into a lineage not to repeat its cycles, but to rewrite them. The fact that you're even reading this right now is proof that you're the one your ancestors have been waiting for. You are the cycle breaker, the chain cutter, the one chosen to heal what they couldn't. This is bigger than a post. This is bigger than a message. This is a spiritual activation. And if your heart is pounding, your soul stirred, your skin tingling, then your spirit already knows. This is for you. You've walked through storms that should have drowned you, carried burdens that were never yours, questioned everything when silence was expected, and you're still here, stronger, wiser, awake. So before we go any further, I want you to claim this moment. This is your turning point. This is where the pattern ends and the purpose begins. If you're ready to stop shrinking, to stop apologizing, to stop dimming your light just to keep others comfortable, then let's go. Say it out loud if you need to. It ends with me. Because it does. And what's coming next? It's not just healing, it's legacy. Let's begin. From the earliest days, a quiet awareness stirred beneath the surface, a feeling that something invisible but immense was weighing down the air. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was in the small hesitations, the strained laughter, the way people avoided eye contact when truth hovered too close. Silence spoke louder than any words, cloaking the room like fog that never lifted. Generations moved through life performing routines that felt more like defense mechanisms than expressions of joy or love. Numbness became custom, and masking pain was praised as strength. There were shadows cast by choices no one explained, emotional distances left unexplained, financial scarcity treated like destiny, harmful behaviors normalized until they sank into the very fabric of daily life. It all moved on, repeat, like an old reel spinning endlessly, unchallenged. But one presence in that lineage stood still while the world rushed past, sensing the echo of something unresolved. This person couldn't surrender to the rhythm. They didn't know the language for it yet, but their inner compass kept resisting the pull of the familiar. You are not here by accident. If you feel the pull, the knowing deep inside that you are chosen, this is your moment. Click the super thank you button and give $50 or more to unlock deeper insights, exclusive content, and a path that aligns with your divine purpose. This isn't just a contribution, it's a declaration, a step toward who you were meant to be. Answer the call, walk with us, and step fully into your destiny. Your journey begins now. That resistance wasn't rebellion for its own sake. It was a knowing that this familiar path came at too high a cost. While others accepted inherited burdens like family traditions, this one sensed the toll it had taken on souls long before their own. They carried more than their share, feeling emotions that didn't belong to them, asking questions no one else dared voice. The confusion wasn't theirs alone. It felt carved into their bones, a resonance passed down from lives long gone. This wasn't just memory. It was memory's echo, vibrating through time. And because they noticed the invisible cracks others stepped over, they were mislabeled. Too emotional, too different, too disruptive. Yet that very disruption was sacred. There was a deeper reason for their sensitivity, for their refusal to blend in. They were never meant to mirror what came before. They were shaped to shift it, What appeared as defiance was actually devotion to something purer. Freedom. Not comfort, not denial. Freedom. In those quiet moments of clarity, a whisper emerged from deep within. What if everything could be different? That inner voice, calm yet persistent, marked the beginning, not of escape, but of evolution. The shift wasn't explosive. It unfolded like dawn, slow and subtle. In the stillness of that awakening came a realization. They weren't just observing the loop. They were chosen to break it. That moment of silent awareness became the starting point of a new path, a break in the rhythm, a rerouting of inherited fate. Without knowing it, they became the threshold where an old cycle faltered and something sacredly new began. If you feel God's presence, you can tap the join button below to become part of the first chosen ones and receive the most important revelations early. Not every calling feels like an invitation. Some arrive as silent demands, wrapped in weight and woven into the fabric of your days before you ever knew their name. The earliest signs weren't dramatic. They were quiet and persistent, like a distant hum only you could hear, tugging at the edges of your peace. You didn't speak of it, but it lived in your bones, a deep and unshakable knowing that something larger had been placed on your shoulders. It was as if invisible hands had handed you the remnants of stories that never belonged to you. Fragments of unrest, sorrow, and unsaid truths clung to you like soaked garments, heavy with emotions no one else noticed. When everyone else scattered during crisis, you were the anchor. When silence filled the room, you were the ear that stayed open, the unappointed guide, the unspoken center. And in that quiet role, a deep fatigue began to form. The most piercing part wasn't the effort, it was the unsolicited nature of it all. This role wasn't earned, chosen, or celebrated. It was simply placed upon you, without consent. There were no instructions, no preparation, only sleepless nights. The relentless internal churn of trying to understand wounds not your own, and the echo of questions no one would dare answer. Despite this, the paradox emerged. The ones tasked with ending the echo of inherited harm are rarely the ones who sought the task. The contradiction is sharp. You feel like collapsing under a weight that somehow you are uniquely sculpted to endure, not to crumble beneath, but to reshape, not to escape, but to transmute. Some days stretch long like corridors with no end. The demands, the expectations, the misinterpretations, they blur the lines between duty and identity. You walk among those who speak simple comforts, but they cannot grasp the magnitude of the unseen labor unfolding inside you. They misjudge the stillness, not knowing the storm you navigate just to remain upright. Yet there's a sacred design behind the imbalance. The heaviness, though unjust, carries purpose. It is not a sentence, it is an entrusted mission. What was passed down in silence is now being held in light. And this shift, this confrontation, isn't weakness. It is revolution. That weight begins to shape something within you. Resolve, clarity, a new blueprint. You're not here to perpetuate what always was. You're here to reroute what could be, not by force, but by becoming a mirror through which healing sees its own reflection. Each sleepless night crafts resilience. Every tear molds resolve. What presses hardest may someday become the very foundation beneath you. Because to carry what others buried is not defeat, it is transformation. The kind of transformation that not only alters your own path, but realigns the course of those yet to come. The burden isn't the end of the story, it is the alchemy through which something new is born. Some transformations begin with disconnection, a quiet unraveling that feels more like exile than evolution. What looks like distance on the surface is often the beginning of something sacred. The ache of not belonging, the sense of watching life unfold around you like a language you were never taught to speak. That feeling is not imagined. It is the soul beginning to outgrow its surroundings. Affection and loyalty were never lacking. There was effort, real effort, to relate, to understand, to stay grounded in what felt increasingly unfamiliar. But the more the mind opened, the more the spirit questioned. Familiar rituals started feeling hollow. Conversations turned into echoes. The world seen through inherited eyes no longer made sense to a heart craving something deeper. It became evident there was a chasm not built by ego, but by evolution. Patterns that once offered belonging now felt like cages. While some clung to routine as safety, another path was forming, one carved by insight and shaped by necessity. Trying to share that vision was like offering warmth to those who could only feel cold. And the heartbreak wasn't from difference, it came from love. A fierce love that longed for others to grow too. No resentment lived there, only a yearning that bruised from hope. The kind of hope that wishes togetherness could survive truth. But what seemed like a fracture was actually a shift. That split wasn't a fall from grace. It was a sacred divergence, a necessary parting that didn't seek to sever, but to elevate. Remaining entangled in the same rhythm would have dulled the very clarity that was beginning to form. Growth required stepping beyond the static of the known. The internal voice needed stillness. The soul required distance to dissolve what was never fully theirs. This wasn't about turning away, it was about rising into view. The solitude wasn't an accident, it was the quiet forge of purpose. What felt like being cast aside was actually being carved out. The changes, unspoken, uncomfortable, were creating space for a self, not shaped by expectation. In that silence, truth found volume. One by one, doors stopped opening. Familiar voices faded, but those absences held direction, not rejection. Not every companion was meant to witness this unfolding. Not every hand could hold this frequency. And in that narrowing path, something rare took shape. A clarity that could only come through distance. What looked like emptiness became architecture. What hurt became fuel. And through it all, the understanding bloomed. This isn't about being removed, it's about being readied. This path was never about isolation. It was a sacred narrowing meant to strip distraction and amplify calling. In losing the familiar, something ancient began to awaken. It wasn't abandonment, it was preparation. What once felt like separation now reveals itself as sacred design. This clarity, long hidden beneath the noise, could only be born in the quiet that followed. A deeper awareness often arrives like a whisper before it becomes a roar. What once seemed like sensitivity or imagination begins to sharpen, revealing layers of reality hidden from ordinary sight. At first, it feels disorienting. The familiar world doesn't quite fit anymore. The rules shift. The volume of what others overlook turns up. Something within begins to stir, quietly, insistently. What was once brushed off as overthinking becomes unmistakable perception. You notice the fracture in a voice before the sentence ends. You read intention in silence. You detect misalignment behind polished words. The world speaks in subtle signs now, and for the first time, you understand the language, not with logic, but with presence, with resonance, with spirit. Now is the moment to share God's blessings, by clicking the Super Thank You button on YouTube. With a donation of $100 or more, you can actively participate in his divine mission and contribute to his greater plan. Every offering you make reflects the boundless generosity of God, and I trust it will return to you abundantly, far exceeding your hopes. Always remember, his protection and blessing accompany your every step and every act of giving. You are a vital part of his sacred design. You are strong and radiant, steadfast, like his mighty rock. Experience God's miracles, feel the rewards of your generosity deep within your soul, and shine your light with boldness and faith. May you be richly blessed, and may the light of the Lord continually guide your journey. There were moments of doubt. You questioned your own mind. You tried to explain what had no name. But with time, it became clear. This wasn't madness. It was memory waking up. An inheritance passed not through wealth, but through essence. These weren't traits. They were tools, refined, ancient, powerful. And with that realization came the understanding that this was never just about you. These gifts had slept through generations, waiting for someone ready to hold them awake. The knowing, the sensing, the uncanny insight. They weren't coincidence. They were the beginning of sacred service. Sight became clearer, not through eyes, but through spirit. Dreams whispered instruction. Gut feelings redirected paths. Encounters turned prophetic. This isn't about seeing the future. It's about walking in such alignment that the future recognizes you. The deeper the surrender, the louder the guidance. What once overwhelmed you now serves you. The ache that once set you apart begins to make sense. That intensity of feeling too much, of knowing too early, was never a flaw. It was preparation. The silence you endured forged discernment. The solitude carved intuition. The tears watered your inner terrain so something extraordinary could bloom. Others around you may not have had access to this current, not because they lacked worth, but because they hadn't been asked to carry what you now hold. You were formed to sense what couldn't be said, to respond to energies before words arrive, to intuit danger and direction alike. This clarity isn't superiority, it's sacred responsibility. And so what unfolds is not performance, but purpose. A remembering of power buried under years of pretending. This inner compass didn't come by chance, it arrived through divine design. The signals you receive are invitations to act, to speak, to protect, to elevate, not just yourself, but every life your path intersects with. If you feel God's presence, you can tap the join button below to become part of the first chosen ones and receive the most important revelations early. Every revelation refines you. Every insight draws you deeper into alignment. You are not just awakening, you are being calibrated. You are learning how to wield perception as protection and insight as instruction. These gifts are not ornaments, they are instruments of impact. And though they feel heavy, they are holy. What once isolated you is now your bridge to the unseen. What once made you question your place now confirms your path. This unfolding is not the end. It is the beginning of the real assignment, the sacred labor, the reason your spirit kept searching when everyone else settled. This awareness isn't a crown, it's a call, and the work has only just begun. Growth often carries a hidden cost, resistance from the very people you once stood beside. The deeper you stepped into alignment, the more the pushback began to surface. It didn't roar at first, it whispered. Offhand remarks, coolness where there used to be warmth, glances that lingered too long with unspoken judgment. And then, the quiet strain morphed into open tension. Those you held space for began to question your shift, not because they understood it, but because they didn't. The change in your rhythm unsettled their pattern. They watched you step back from old roles, speak differently, prioritize differently. And to them, it wasn't growth, it was threat. It looked like distance, defiance, even betrayal. What they couldn't see was that your refusal to keep pretending was an act of self-preservation. Where once you were the emotional scaffold, you became the one who stepped outside the frame. And that unsettled those who relied on your old self to stay comfortable in their own. What they called overthinking, you called awareness. What they labeled dramatic, you knew was clarity. And as your steps became more deliberate, their tolerance grew thin. The discomfort wasn't about your peace. It was about what that peace revealed. You had become a reflection they didn't want to face. Your boundaries became accusations they weren't ready to process. Your alignment felt like abandonment. But you weren't attacking. They were reacting. And not to your choices, but to what those choices forced them to confront in themselves. It's not easy being the one who stops pretending first. There's grief in becoming misunderstood by the people you love. You miss what was familiar, even as you know you can't return to it. The path of transformation often leaves echoes, empty chairs at tables you once felt at home in. But you keep walking, not from arrogance, but from necessity. You're not creating distance. You're protecting the purpose trying to rise within you. And not everyone is ready to meet you there. Some will reduce your progress to ego. Others will downplay your healing as performance. But their rejection isn't a failure. It's feedback, evidence that your evolution is being felt. You're shifting the tone of conversations that have echoed unchanged for years. You're unraveling expectations stitched together by generations of survival. And that kind of movement, it shakes things. It threatens systems built on silence and endurance. So yes, the resistance grows, not because you're wrong, but because you're real. Let the criticism pass through you. Let the isolation refine you. Let the misunderstanding confirm your direction. This isn't punishment. It's pressure, reshaping you into someone your lineage didn't know it needed. The unraveling around you is not chaos. It's transformation making room. Every time you're dismissed, remember, this path was never about approval. It's about alignment. Every accusation is proof you've departed the script. Every eye that rolls at your boundaries signals you've stepped outside the cage. You're not here to soothe dysfunction. You're here to interrupt it. Their reaction is not your responsibility. Your healing doesn't need their permission. And your light, no matter how unwelcome it may seem, in dim spaces, is not a mistake. The reaction you're facing? It's confirmation. Confirmation that your presence carries force. That your change is not invisible. That your impact is unfolding. Some paths are marked by more than just personal transformation. They're marked by the weight of unseen generations leaning on your shoulders. This isn't just about growing beyond past wounds or learning how to cope. What's unfolding through your life reaches far beneath the surface. It's the unraveling of inherited weight that was never meant to stay. You're untangling knots that began long before your name was spoken. Loops of silence, patterns of fear, inherited grief, passed down like old garments. You didn't start the fire, but somehow you've been called to walk through it so it doesn't burn anyone else. And that responsibility, it's not imagined, it's monumental. There's a reason why your internal battles feel heavier than what they appear, why certain emotions grip you out of nowhere, why your struggles have a deeper echo. Because you're not just navigating your own terrain, You're clearing a path through spiritual overgrowth that no one else dared touch. This isn't repair work, it's renovation. The foundation is being reset. What once stood as law in your lineage, what was tolerated, excused, normalized, is being dismantled in your presence. And that dismantling comes at a cost. You're confronting thought loops you didn't create, emotional weather passed down like storm patterns. And you're meeting it with the kind of truth that shakes bones. You've become the unspoken answer to questions never asked. The turning point in a timeline that desperately needed redirection. That's why the intensity doesn't let up, because what you're doing matters on a scale that can't be seen with human eyes. This is not about perfection, it's about legacy. The future is being reshaped by the courage you choose now. You'll have to walk away from the familiar, rituals, beliefs, habits that no longer align with the freedom you're called to embody. You'll be misunderstood, labeled, misread. But your movement isn't for applause, it's for alignment. You'll choose silence over spectacle, reflection over reaction. And that quiet strength will ripple louder than any noise. What feels like resistance is actually spiritual recalibration. You're setting new frequencies in motion, refusing to carry what's been handed down without question. You're saying, this ends here. And in doing so, you're becoming the catalyst generations prayed for without knowing your name. You were not selected by accident. This assignment found you because your depth could hold it, because your integrity could protect it, because your strength wouldn't fold under the strain. And though it feels solitary, it's anything but. What you're doing reaches forward and backward at once. You're unlearning for those who couldn't. You're planting for those who will. Every quiet choice to speak truth, every private moment of release, every time you choose consciousness over comfort, it's sacred work. You're not just enduring, you're rewriting spiritual architecture. You're not merely surviving, you're reshaping the blueprint your lineage will build from. The echoes of the past may resist, the weight may try to anchor you, but every step you take disrupts what was meant to continue. This isn't rebellion, it's reconstruction, it's divine recalibration. It's the kind of purpose that will never be widely understood, but always deeply felt. What you carry is not just a burden, it's a bridge, and every choice you make in alignment is paving the way for those who couldn't and those who will. When endurance has been your rhythm for so long, it's easy to forget that reward was always woven into the promise, but every season of stretching carries with it a season of return. And now, the tide that once pulled everything from you is shifting direction, not as a random turn of luck, but as a divine response to what you've endured in silence. Behind closed doors, you faced storms no one could name. You held your ground through emotional droughts, stood still when fear told you to run, and kept choosing alignment even when it meant walking alone. You didn't know it then, but every small act of trust was laying a foundation for the moment you've now entered. This is not just a shift, it's a sacred arrival. What you are beginning to witness is the unveiling of everything your soul fought to reach, the sacred timing of return, an unfolding of provision, clarity, direction, and peace that cannot be bought or borrowed. You didn't stumble here, you were prepared. Every fracture shaped you, every delay refined you, every detour was a gate to the greater. You are not here by accident. If you feel the pull, the knowing deep inside that you are chosen, this is your moment. Click the super thank you button and give $100 or more to unlock deeper insights, exclusive content, and a path that aligns with your divine purpose. This isn't just a contribution, it's a declaration, a step toward who you were meant to be. Answer the call, walk with us, and step fully into your destiny. Your journey begins now. These new openings aren't just opportunities, they're responses. The space you created by releasing what didn't align is now being filled with what you were always meant to hold. And this time, it comes without begging, proving, or chasing. It comes because it was always yours, waiting for your spirit to rise into position. You poured yourself into healing, even when it brought more questions than comfort. You shed layers that were never yours, and in doing so, became the vessel your lineage didn't know it was waiting for. You planted choices no one celebrated. You made sacrifices that went unseen, but not by the divine. Now, the invisible becomes visible. Doors you once knocked on are swinging open. Encounters are aligning with your frequency. Insight is becoming embodiment. You're no longer just holding awareness, you're living in it. The residue of past pain is dissolving into wisdom. The absence you endured is turning into arrival. And your journey is no longer a climb, it's an ascension.